Hello everyone, I'm Renee and this is my Dialogue Utility AI system for Unity. For my Bachelor of Games and Virtual Worlds programming degree, I'd been tasked to create a developer tool, game or simulation. In my case, I had decided to create a combined dialogue system and utility AI system to improve systematic interactions with small role NPCs. Without further ado, let me explain my system to you. Firstly, I've created a demonstration of how my system can be used. I have two scenes, one a house scene and two an overworld scene. They're both interconnected using a trigger to load the scenes at the door of the house the player spawns at. The house scene has one NPC in it, which is represented with the archer. She cycles through 3 different actions, the actions being wander, sleep and drink. She determines what action she needs to perform by evaluating her current needs. This evaluation considers her current need state, the distance required to be able to perform the action to replenish this need, and the amount of need decrement that will occur before being able to replenish that need. These needs can be seen in the AI canvas prefab that I've put into the scene, which allows for visual need bars to diminish and replenish according to the need value of the NPC. What determines the need to diminish is caused by certain conditions. The condition that you can currently see slowly diminishing each of the needs is 3 separate time of day conditions that I've created. These apply for both day and night so that they're consistently being decreased over time. For the time of day conditions, the multiplier value is what is applied to the need per second. You can pass in the need that is affected by this condition or an emotion. When the night field is ticked, the effect will only be applied during nighttime, and if the day condition is ticked, the effect will only be applied during the day. Both can be ticked to have the condition met at all times. Time of day conditions rely on the sun prefab, or at least an object with the sun tag on it that rotates the X position of the object. In my demonstration, I use a sun rotation script that allows for me to set the speed of the sun's rotation. The Archer NPC has 3 needs, which are entertainment, which relates to the wander action, energy, which relates to the sleep action, and thirst, which relates to the drink action. Each need requires a name, a need value, which will be adjusted during gameplay, so this doesn't need to be set in the inspector, and an emotion affected multipliers, which will apply an effect to emotion specified, using the multiplier applied to the emotion per second and identifying if the condition is above or below the value specified. In this case, I have anger applying to multiplier value if the need value of the energy is below 0.6. For entertainment and thirst, I simply have provided their names and the values will be adjusted during gameplay, with no emotions affected by these needs. When creating an action, the user can specify the needs and emotions affected by this action. This requires the user to pass in the need or emotion that's affected and the multiplier that is applied per second during this action. There are 2 different types of actions, one being a wander action and the other being the use object action. The wander action requires additional fields such as a radius, which keeps the NPC's range of selecting the next destination within this value. Also has a needs boundary section. If that's set to true, then it will use the boundary prefab passed in below, which should have a collider on it with the collider size set to the boundary size that you wish to have the NPC stay within. The idle timer will be the time that the NPC is idle for before finding a new location to walk to and then performing the idle action again. The use object action can be one of 2 different types. One can be a holdable action, where for example the drinking action would require the NPC to pick up the glass of water in her hand, and for the sleep action, that NPC would need to perform a series of animations to look like she's going into the bed to sleep rather than picking up the object. There is a field for allowing animations to be listed in order of how they should be played out for certain actions. For the drinking action, there is a pick up object animation and a drink animation. The animations in order should include every animation applied to this action. The main animation should be the last element in the animations in order list and also specified in the main animation field. Positions for animations allow for prefab transforms to be listed in case certain actions require the NPC with certain rotation and position. The exit action position allows for the NPC to spawn at this position and rotation when leaving this action. The base offsets for animations is a list of Y positions that you want the NavMesh agent base offset to be as with the positions for animations field. It does not apply the Y position, which is why I'm using values for the base offset animations instead, in which once the action is complete, it will reset the original base offset. The max speed field is used for defining the maximum speed that the NPC can move when walking towards the usable object. Any useObject action should be applied to a game object in the scene with the usable tag, and the usable script should be attached with the action passed into it. Where a range is specified for the maximum range that the NPC can begin performing this action on the object, it also has a field for defining whether it is a holdable object or not. Any holdable objects will be picked up with the NPC's hand and put back to its original position when the action is finished. Emotions will also be displayed in the AI canvas when the NPC has emotions passed into it. The happiness emotion is determined by factors such as whether other negative emotions have high values. Emotions can be affected by needs, that they can also be affected by certain actions as well, and also dialogue sequences. The archer has two emotions, which is anger and happiness. Within the agent script, the user can determine how long the NPC will take before evaluating their need states and current situation. They are also able to specify the need value at which requires them to evaluate their situation. Any time of day condition needs to be passed into the agent's conditions field. Other conditions such as need conditions and action conditions are automatically generated if there are specified affected needs or emotions by performing the action or the need being of a certain value. In this scenario, the archer will cycle through between sleeping, drinking and wandering around the room, and in the case that the archer is unable to sleep, the energy value becomes 0.6 or less, her anger emotion will gradually increase. The agent script requires the prefabs of a need and emotion bar which are provided in the prefabs folder, as well as the hand and head of this NPC, which can be passed in from the hierarchy into the inspector. The conversation possibilities field is used for any conversations created that are conversations of this NPC. There is also the use utility AI bool to determine whether or not the AI cycles through different actions and has its needs and emotions affected. When turned off, the NPC will remain idle and look at the player if within the range of speaking to. Each NPC requires an animation component on the parent of the model's body parts. All possible animations of this character must be passed into the animations field, and the animation clips must be set to legacy. Like the AI system, the dialogue system can work with or without the other system. The dialogue prefab is needed in the scene to handle character portraits, names, dialogue boxes, animations, and the dialogue text. It requires a default font in case the character or dialogue font is not specified. Default dialogue box color, which will use a plain image with color and an option for transparency, and a dialogue box color that applies to any specified dialogue box sprites. For each character, including both NPCs and players, a character object is required if they are used in any dialogue. Character objects require the character's name, default portrait image of the character, the dialogue box used for their dialogue, fonts and font colors for both the name text and dialogue text, and determining whether or not the character is the player or an NPC. Passing in an NPC into this field requires the NPC to be a prefab passed in from the project folder. A character's dialogue can be created within the project folder. A dialogue object requires the character, sentences spoken with each sentence displayed one at a time, the teletype speed, whether the dialogue uses the character's default font and font color, or a different font and font color that is passed into the font field and the text color field, a sprite representing the character's expression, an animation that the character will play during this dialogue rather than the talk animation, a dialogue sound, which could be a grunt, interjection, or even the dialogue spoken. Each dialogue object also has a section for impacting specified emotions with a value that is added to the emotion's current value. And lastly, a field for whether this dialogue requires a player response, providing 3 possible conversation buttons if set to true and the conversations have been set. Conversations are also created in the project folder, where a string can be passed in that will display on the choice buttons. The emotion that the NPC must have as their highest emotion to trigger this conversation. If there are multiple conversations with the same emotion as their trigger, then a random conversation from the possible options is selected. Then we have a section to specify all the dialogues within this conversation. These must be placed in order of how you want them to be played out. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to create your own NPC. I'm going to make a different version of the Archer NPC that I showed in my demonstration, and I'm going to allow for her to stand idly by turning off her use AI system in the agent script, and I'm going to have a very short dialogue sequence. So that was how to create an idle NPC with dialogue. Next, I'll show you how to create a wandering NPC with dialogue. So that was adding the ability to create a wandering action for your NPC. Next, I'm going to add some needs and some more actions such as drink to my NPC. And that was adding in the needs entertainment for the wander action and thirst for the new action drink, which I've used with a cylinder. Next, I will be adding in emotions and some branching dialogue. So that there was about 20 minutes of creating this NPC character, which this video was at ×2 speed. This is it for this tutorial without making it too long with all the possibilities of this system. I'd love to have your feedback on my Dialogue Utility AI system and let me know if this would be a system you would use or if there are any changes you would make to suit your developing style. Thanks again for watching.